Philip Rucker is a national political correspondent for the Washington Post and is good enough to join us now. And Phil, reports of turmoil have continued to surface now in the last 48 hours, to be specific, as we saw the president-elect there insisting the process is going smoothly. What does your reporting suggest?
Well, our reporting suggests it's not going so smoothly, and indeed there's a bloodletting on this transition staff focused really on the issue of loyalty. A lot of people who were brought in by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie when he chaired the transition have been removed or have resigned or have been layered, meaning demoted, and sort of their authority has been taken away, including Mike Rogers, a former congressman from Michigan, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, who was seen as a potential pick to head the CIA or director of national intelligence or another senior role. He was helping guide the national security and intelligence part of this transition, and he's been removed from that position.
What role in the infighting, then, are you hearing Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is playing?
He's playing an extraordinary role in this transition, sort of whispering a lot of moves to the president-elect and having a lot of authority over who's considered for which jobs, what the structure is going to look like, and so forth. We know that he has a personal animosity with Chris Christie. About a decade ago, Chris Christie was the U.S. attorney in New Jersey responsible for prosecuting Jared Kushner's father, who ended up serving 2 years in prison for a number of charges, including racketeering, I believe. And so he's playing a big role in this transition. He's a big power center right now. We don't see him publicly that much. He doesn't have a formal job title in the administration, but he's perhaps the most powerful player right now as Trump is building the government.
We've also heard many reports about the transition team being collectively taken by surprise as to the enormity of the task at hand. What do you know?
Well, it's a huge task. There are 4,100 jobs in the government that Donald Trump has to fill through political appointments. This is much bigger than just picking a few cabinet secretaries. And the transition team got off to a late start. One of the frustrations, actually, with Chris Christie was that over the final month of the campaign, the Trump people believed that he and his team were not doing enough to ready the transition. There was a belief that Trump would likely lose, so they were not investing a lot of time in getting things all ready to go. So when Trump inherits this transition the morning after the election, they discovered that there was a lot of work left to be done. And so they're behind schedule. They're trying to catch up. Trump aides insist that there's a smooth, kind of orderly process here, but still we've had no announcements of any cabinet officials, and there's not any indication that the hiring is speeding up right now.
The president-elect will be inheriting a new Senate Minority Leader when he does take office. Chuck Schumer, elected to the post this morning. He spoke on Capitol Hill just moments ago. I want to play you a piece of the sound and get your response on the other side.
Indeed, a silver lining in the deep clouds of this election is that on many economic issues, President-elect Trump and his campaign was closer to us than to Republican leadership, which always seems to wind up in the corner of the special interests. And I've told him just what I've told you. When we can agree on issues, then we're going to work with them. We're not going to just, as some have done here in the past, said just because it's President Trump's idea or thought, we're going to oppose it per se. Where we can work together, we will.
Closer to us than to Republican leadership. Phil, what do you make of it?
It's remarkable. One of the most important relationships, I think, in the new Washington is going to be between President Trump and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. They're both New Yorkers. They both like to get things done. And I think they're both going to move with a lot of efficiency to try to find some areas where they can get together. You can start with infrastructure spending. It's a priority both for the Senate Democrats and for President-elect Trump. And there very well may be a big deal to rebuild bridges, roads, tunnels, airports, certainly. I know Schumer and Trump both have had a lot of complaints about the airports in the New York City area. So look, this could be a productive presidency, believe it or not, if they're able to find some common ground on these economic and spending issues.
Well, and Phil, as has virtually every one of Schumer's colleagues, these last 48 hours, the senator also discussed Mr. Trump's hiring of Steve Bannon as his chief strategist. He said, and I quote, "We'll be watching him closely," end quote. Is there a sense of any recourse for the Democrats at this point other than sounding alarm bells?
No, they don't have any power to do anything about this. They've certainly sounded alarm bells. There have been statements of shock and dismay about the appointment of Steve Bannon, who had been leading the alt-right news website Breitbart for several years. But look, there's nothing they can really do except complain and watch him and try to hold him accountable. This is not a position that requires any Senate confirmation. There's nothing that Trump has to do to disclose anything about Bannon by law in order to install him as the counselor at the White House. So it's sort of TBD at this point.
Phil, before I let you go, I do want to ask you about something that happened last night. Donald Trump, it was reported, told the press following him that he was staying in for the night, and then essentially bucked protocol, went to dinner at the 21 Club, a restaurant near Trump Tower here in Midtown Manhattan, but did so without the protective press pool there to document it all. If you could explain exactly what happened, but how it's being perceived by so many as being problematic.
Yeah, it's very problematic, and it sets a pretty dangerous precedent, I think, for the new administration. What you described is exactly what happened. The pool that is assigned, a group of reporters assigned to follow the president-elect, were told by the president-elect's staff that he was in for the night, that he would be staying at Trump Tower, and sure enough, he left. He went in a motorcade to a steakhouse in Manhattan to have dinner with his family. Now, he's entitled to have dinner with his family on his own, but he's not supposed to make a movement like that without a pool of reporters following him. And that's partly to hold him accountable on behalf of the public, so we know where he's going, who he's meeting with, and his whereabouts. But it's also in case of an emergency. For example, if there had not been a pool traveling with President Bush on September 11th, 2001, there would be no reports for the public about where the president was or where Air Force One was or any of the consequential things that happened on that day. You know, God forbid something were to happen to Trump, he might have gotten shot or in an accident in the motorcade on the way to that steakhouse. And it's really important that there be members of the press there to document it, to follow it, and to be able to report to the public what exactly has happened. And so my understanding is that the Trump transition team is working with news organizations to try to implement a protective pool. That would be a pool that would follow the president-elect wherever he goes, the same way that the White House pool does for President Obama. We at the Washington Post, and I think a lot of other news organizations, including at CBS News, would like to see that happen immediately, and hopefully it will in the next few days.
It was an issue, of course, during the campaign when Hillary Clinton left a 9/11 memorial event, and her pool covering her did lose track of the candidate there. That's for right. Several hours. Again, it is vitally important, and I have to just personally agree, Phil. We are not speaking in an echo chamber here. The import of the protected press pool is a significant one. Philip Rucker of the Washington Post, as always, we appreciate the insight.
Thanks very much, Josh.